how green is London? Very green. There you can see the statistics and the size of what's considered, you know, public open space. It may interest you to know that actually in 2020, Lisbon was voted the European Green Capital of 2020 by the European Commission. So we just pipped at the post. So these are some of the places that I visited during lockdown. So on the left-hand side, you can see some places are mentioned up in the Hamstead area, Kilburn, that's Regents Park, and then down to Kensington Gardens. Then on the right, the middle map, if you like, Kensington Gardens, Ruskin Park, which is right next door to King's College Hospital on Denmark Hill, Morden Hall Park, and Richmond. I went to lots of other places, but I picked these out as some of the most fun. And this is Golders Hill Park Zoo. You can access it through Hamstead Heath, and interestingly, this is a free zoo. So you can go to Regents Park, or you can come up to Golders Hill Park, and there's lots of animals. There's birds, there's fish, there's, as you can see on the right-hand side, there's ringtail lemurs, and there's deer, there's lots of Bambis. It's really wonderful place. Wallabies, you name it, small mammals, you know. And the zoo's been part of the park since 1905. And the first herd of deer was donated by an MP, Sir Samuel Scott. And I found out that in 2020, a local banker who lives in the area, and he and his wife go here all the time, because you can adopt the animals on a yearly basis to help support feeding and looking after them and everything. And a local banker adopted every animal in the zoo, which I thought was rather wonderful. The ring-tailed lemurs, who are from Madagascar, but the ones here actually came from Yorkshire Wildlife Park. Oops, what's happened there? Hello, are you all seeing that? I don't know why that's suddenly come up. Sorry, apologies here. Why is that playing up? Shouldn't do. Right, so I think Paul has sort of kind of given away the clue here. But the house on the left-hand side is the hill. We're now in Hamstead, near Hamstead Heath. Originally, the house was built in 1807, and then it was rebuilt by George Fisher in 1895. He lost all of his money, and in 1904, he sold it to William Hesketh Lever. Lord Leverhulme, best known as the soap magnate and founder of Lever Brothers, nowadays Unilever. And Hesketh bought two neighbouring houses as well, so that he had them demolished so that he could extend the gardens. And he brought in sort of one of the best landscape designers of the time, Thomas Mawson, which brings me to the photo on the right-hand side. This is Port Sunlight Village up in Merseyside. And there were 900 homes built for Lord Leverhulme's 3,500 workers and families to be housed there. A lot of these industrialists did this sort of thing, built their own villages with schools and libraries to improve the lot of their workers and provide decent housing as well. And one interesting person I discovered, as you do this, you come across all sorts of bizarre things. Fiona Bruce, a TV presenter and host of Antiques Roadshow, actually grew up in Port Sunlight because her father was managing director of a division of Unilever. Nowadays, about 250 of the original houses in the village belong to the Port Sunlight Village Trust, and the remainder are privately owned. They were sold by the company in about the 1980s. But up until then, all of the residents were employees of Unilever and their families. And there's the plaque that's on the wall of the house as you're walking up Hamstead Lane. there's 3 plaques on the house, but for purposes of time, I've concentrated on Lever. But he died, as you can see, in 1925. And then the estate was bought by Inverforth, Andrew Weir, the first Baron Inverforth. He was a ship owner, and so he renamed the house Inverforth House, as you would. He was quite a workaholic. He kept on working till his 91st year and died in Inverforth House in 1955. He bequeathed the house to the Industrial Orthopaedic Society. It became the women's section of Manor House Hospital, Golders Hill, 100 beds, and a home for 60 to 70 nursing staff. But then in the 1980s, the society decided they didn't need such a place anymore, and it was converted into 9 very luxury apartments. And the middle photo there shows the house in the distance, because now we are viewing it from these wonderful gardens, the pergola, which Thomas Mawson worked with Lord Leverhulme to develop. It's fate, because this was really pretty speedy, actually building these gardens. This is the pergola going all the way around. You go up steps and you walk around, and you can see it's got this lovely open woodwork. It's very, very beautiful on a beautiful sunny day. Amazing views over Hamstead Heath. But they were very lucky, because at the time the Northern Line tube extension was happening nearby, and the contractors were desperate to get rid of all this tunnelled spoil. And they even paid Leverhulme, just not a lot, small fee, if he would take all the spoil away. So he arranged for it to come up to Hill House, and that provided the material for the raised garden. The extensions continued after World War I, and the whole pergola, summer pavilion and viewing terrace was completed in 1925, sadly, the year that Lord Leverhulme died. So he didn't get to enjoy it for very long. Out of interest, the gardens were cared for in 1960 by London County Council, and when they were abolished, Greater London Council took over, but nowadays it's City of London Corporation that looks after Hamstead Heath and the pergola, the gardens, and the pergola is now Grade 2 listed. So carrying on in this area, we're now going to go to Kenwood. And I'm a little bit naughty here. I don't have the copyright to use this, but I wanted you to see an engraving. This is on the English Heritage site. And it shows an engraving of how the house would have looked in 1788, as it says there, when Dido was living there. Now, if anybody saw the film Belle, it's quite a big hit film. It's the story of Dido Belle here on the left-hand side in the white silk satin dress with her cousin, if you like, Elizabeth Murray. Elizabeth Murray was the daughter of William Murray, the first Earl of Mansfield and Lord Chief Justice, probably best known for challenging the legality of slave ownership, and went a long way towards the abolition of slaves. So it's quite interesting that he did have this girl who was the daughter of Sir John Lindsay, who was Murray's Earl of Mansfield's. He was his nephew, and he died overseas. He was a naval officer, Royal Naval Officer. It seems he actually did have children by several young black women when he was abroad, but this one, Dido, actually came to live with William Murray and his daughter Elizabeth, as I say, and mostly the stories seem to say that they were educated together. She was, well dressed, she was not a servant or a slave in the house, unusual for the 18th century, obviously. Just a little note, some of you may have been on my Hamstead Cemetery talk, and I couldn't resist throwing this little nugget of information in. So one of the graves, a tomb in fact, in Hamstead Cemetery is that of His Imperial Highness, the Grand Duke Michael Michaelovich, and his wife Sophie, Countess de Torby. They were from Russia. She was the granddaughter of Pushkin. He was the grandson of Tsar Nicholas I. But when he married Sophie, it was a love match. He was supposed to be marrying Princess Mary of Teck, who became Queen Mary. But instead he married the girl he loved. And for that he lost his military title and they were sort of exiled. They came to Cannes, they came to Kiel, and then settled for 7 years at Kenwood House. So I just wanted to share that with you, just the idea of them living there in 1910 to 1917, having the most wonderful balls of all time. Now, as you go around parks in London, what you realise is we have an enormous amount of fabulous free public art. So, I couldn't reach this. So that's Kenwood House, looking at it from the lake up to, and this is a photograph of my students, Camden tour guides. We had a summer party at Kenwood House. That was a bit of fun. I'm not in the photo, but I took the photo. So that's not the public art. This is public art. This is by, to me, a lesser known French sculptor, Eugène Dodane. It's called Flamme, F-L-A-M-M-E, and it was bequeathed to English Heritage in 2005. Better known, Henry Moore. And this is, it's called Two-Piece Reclining Figure number 5. It's one of a series that he was exploring, these two separate bronze pieces on a bronze plinth, loosely representing human figures. He was trying this sort of thing out in about the 1960s. But what's interesting to me, and hopefully to you, is how come we've got a Henry Moore in grounds where for free anybody can wander here at Kenwood. Well, in 1978, it was presented by Henry Moore to the Tate Gallery because they were hosting an exhibition to celebrate Moore's 80th birthday. And they displayed this piece on the lawn outside the Tate, along with some other sculptures. But after the exhibition had finished, the then director of the Tate, Norman Reed, and the trustees decided to loan these large-scale works to galleries across the country rather than put them into storage where nobody could see them. And Kenwood House had requested a loan of a sculpture by Moore, and so Two-Piece Reclining Figure number 4 was installed at Kenwood House in 1983. And the site where it's positioned now was actually chosen by Henry Moore himself, who died, I should know this, but you probably all do, he died in 1986. And he had a studio in Hamstead, so we're not far from where his studio was. And this fellow sculptor also had a studio in Hamstead, and that is Barbara Hepworth. This is her piece called Monolith Empyrean, which loosely means heavenly stone. In Christian literature, Empyrean is the name for a dwelling place of God. And at the end of Dante's Paradiso, Dante visits God in the Empyrean. Anyway, according to Historic England, it dates from about 1953 and originally was sited on the South Bank and then moved here to Kenwood in 1963. When she died in 1975, she was described as probably the most significant woman artist in the history of art to this day. There has been speculation that this piece may well have been done by Barbara Hepworth to commemorate the death of her son, Paul Skeeping, who was killed flying for the RAF in Malaya in 1953. So moving along, this is a surprise, I bet, I hope. but a pleasant surprise because this is in Kilburn, not somewhere one thinks of with peace and art. But believe me, this is a delightful park on a street that runs up between sort of West Hamstead and Kilburn, leads to a social housing, council housing. And on the left-hand side, the picture on the left there, it's a stone crane. So that artwork there it's steel crane. And that's at the entrance to this Maygrove Peace Park. And the park opened in 1983 to coincide with the 39th anniversary of the Nagasaki atomic bomb. And one of the victims was a young 2-year-old girl, Sadako Sasaki. She survived another 10 years and died at age 12. She died of leukemia because of radiation exposure. But by then she had folded 1,000 origami cranes, which has gone on to become the symbol of innocent victims of nuclear warfare. So it was appropriate that this crane would be put here. So then you go past the crane and you start walking up a path, and there's all these plaques embedded into the path as you walk along. Messages of hope and peace from a whole variety of people. I mean, you can see Albert Einstein there, you can see Pierre Clersol, who was a Swiss peace activist. The top right is Haile Selassie. It's got Bob Marley as well, because Haile Selassie's words there were used in a song by Bob Marley called War, so they both get their names on here. But there's also messages of peace from John Lennon, Edmund Burke, British statesman and philosopher from the 18th century. And then so you continue up the path reading all these lovely messages of hope and peace. It's quite charming. And you come to the first listed piece of sculpture by Antony Gormley. No, it's not the little black gorgeous animal sitting patiently there. It's this piece on top of the stone by, as I say, by Antony Gormley. It's called Untitled Listening Statue. So I walk this beautiful dog Wellington for a couple who are lawyers and they work from home. And during the day, he gets really irritated that they're home, but they're not playing with him. So I get to take him out most days. And we were walking through Maygrove Peace Park and I got my camera out to take a photo and he posed for me. So I hope you enjoy little Wellington there. And then there's also this plaque from the mayor of Hiroshima talking about, you know, the citizens of Hiroshima and the effect of nuclear war on the community there. So now we're going to leave this part of northwest London and head down towards the canal to a place called Rembrandt Gardens. And it says there on this plaque on the wall inside Rembrandt Gardens that they were renamed. It's probably not too clear, but they were originally called Warwick Avenue Gardens. They were set up in the 1950s when a whole load of houses in the area were demolished. But then in 1975, they were renamed Rembrandt Gardens because the city of Westminster was twinned at the time with the city of Amsterdam. And there was a ceremony where the Dutch presented tulips to Westminster City Council, and they appeared in full Dutch national dress. I have searched. I've looked for the photos. I can't find it. I need to get into my library to find that. But inside these gardens, they're not huge, but it's quiet and intimate. It's really very, very nice. I found this tree. Now, I don't know if anybody recognizes this. I had to look up on the internet what it is. And then I asked a friend of mine who's done a landscape gardening course, and she came up with more information. It's actually a strawberry tree, the Arbutus unedo, an evergreen shrub or a small tree in the flowering plant of Ericaceae, native to the Mediterranean region, not related to the common strawberry plant. And there you can see some of the information that I got. Now, Paul and I are both ex-music business, and my friend Cherry, it was Paul knows Cherry very well.
Oh, right.
Gardener, yeah. So she was the one who told me, well, did you know that Joni Mitchell, Canadian songwriter, includes a reference to the arbutus rustling in her song For the Roses? It sounds like applause, and she calls the arbutus tree her favourite all-time tree, and she even had one outside her door in a house that she built. I can tell you why this tree was brought to my attention when I was in Rembrandt Gardens. I'd gone with a friend who went to use the public conveniences, and a woman walked across to this tree and was pulling the red, ripe, strawberry looking things off. And I said, oh, can you eat them? Oh, yes, you know, started telling me about them. So I picked a whole load, and they're very soft. They're quite watery inside. They're not like a strawberry at all. They're closer to like a lychee almost. And I brought a whole bundle home with a bowl of yogurt. Delicious. Can't wait for summer to go back and get some more. And here's another little thing for you, Paul, to I'll send you this if you didn't know already. But in Portugal, it's sometimes distilled into a potent brandy known as Medrono. And in Madrid, it's distilled into Madrono. So we all expect to have a little bit of this sweet, fruity liqueur next time we gather with you, Paul. So here's the gardens. And when you sit here, lovely, quiet, there's lots of benches around to sit. And you look out over the Regent's Canal and you see an island that's known as Brownings Island because the poet Robert Browning is said to have lived nearby. And it's a wildfowl island with willow trees, wildfowl, and it's kind of protected. You can't actually get to it. You can't walk out to it, can't wade out to it, you can't sort of canoe round or whatever and moor onto it. And it's at the junction of the Regent's Canal and the Paddington arm of the Grand Union Canal. Now, interestingly, you know, there's always this debate. This area is known as Little Venice. Well, I've just told you Rembrandt Gardens, Amsterdam connection. It's possible that in her detective novel in 1934, Death of a Ghost, Marjorie Allingham, she gave the name Little Venice to a house overlooking the canal where I think a murder takes place at the beginning of the book. That name caught on, and of course, it's estate agents that use these names. And so they started using it to market their very expensive properties in this area. I mentioned that the houses were being demolished in the 1950s for when Rembrandt Gardens was being built. And one whole of the east side of this pool here, so it's kind of where we're looking across that way, they were demolished and replaced by Rembrandt Gardens. Amsterdam's known as Venice of the North, so that does make sense. But one studio which was not demolished, if anybody knows this artist, was used by Felix Topolsky, and it seems that the Prince of Wales once visited him there, here in Little Venice. Now we're going to go a little bit further south to Regent's Park, and you can see beautiful. This is a little sort of a secret garden. So I'm letting you in on a nice little secret here. That is the entrance there, and it's off the inner circle. I'm going to flash up a map shortly, but flash it up very quickly, because these gardens used to belong to St. John's Lodge. Again, if you were on the Hamstead Cemetery talk, you'll remember St. Dunstan's, now the Blind Veterans UK, originally started in St. Dunstan's Lodge in Regent's Park. When the owner wanted that back, they were then allowed to move into St. John's Lodge for a time. And I told you the story of the Playboy Prince Geoffrey, the brother of the Sultan Brunei, who's the current owner of this property, St. John's Lodge, which is the white building you can see at the back, but it's separated. You can't go from the gardens to his house. The gardens are open to the public. The gardens were built by a Robert Weir Schultz in 1889, and they were at the time built as a garden to be fit for meditation. And whenever I've been there, there's always somebody doing Tai Chi or yoga or just sitting quietly and reading. It's a very silent place, and people, certainly in my experience, always respect that. And there's always been signs there saying children are not allowed to run around and be noisy, because you can go into Regent's Park and do that. And it's a lot of small gardens all interconnected, and each one's kind of got its own personality and different planting. It's a sheer delight. It really, really is. And you can see this centerpiece sculpture here in the middle. That is Hylas and the Nymph. Again, grade 2 piece of sculpture. Hylas, well, we know Hylas from his role with, whoops, oh God, I'm so sorry. Does anybody else have this problem? I knew it, my computer's been playing up. My sincere apologies. He was the arms bearer to Heracles. And he's also meant to have been the same-sex love interest to Heracles. And this, it's not a euphemism. Bisexuality, ancient Greeks, completely accepted. They didn't even have a word for sort of homosexuality. It was kind of, they didn't have homosexual, heterosexual. It was kind of all just sex to them, as it were. This statue that you're looking at was donated by the Royal Academy of Arts in 1933. And this is meant to be one of the best, they actually call the gardens the best arts and crafts, because obviously they were created the end of the 19th century, one of the best surviving arts and crafts gardens in London. Henry Pegram was the sculptor of this piece, Hylas, and he was born nearby in Camden Town, and his father manufactured prams and rocking horses, which I rather liked. So if everybody's ready, here's the map. There it is, it's gone. Okay, so further into Regent's Park on the Broad Walk is this lovely fountain, which is known as the Ready Money Fountain. You may note it's a beautiful piece of Victorian Gothic sculpture. Again, grade 2 listed. So we've got all these free wonderful pieces of art in London, but it's also known as the Parsi Fountain. And it was donated by Sir Kalasji Jahangir. He's the guy with the nickname Ready Money. And he donated it he was a wealthy industrialist. And he was from Bombay, donated it to the Regent's Park in 1869 as a thank you for the protection that he and fellow Parsis received from British rule in India. Just out of interest, it's 10 tons of Sicilian marble, 4 tons of red Aberdeen granite, and it was unveiled by the aforementioned Princess Mary of Teck, who went on to become Queen Mary, after whom the nearby Queen Mary Gardens are named. Now we're going to go down to the canal. And here we have on the left-hand side, this is Macclesfield Bridge, but it's better known, certainly to all of us guides, as the blow-up bridge. And you may have heard about it. Just before 5 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd of October, 1874, the narrowboat barge Tilbury, loaded with sugar, nuts, petroleum, and gunpowder, you get the idea. It just exploded. It wasn't a bomb went off, it exploded. It was the mixture of the goods that they were carrying. Exploded right under this bridge, Macclesfield Bridge, very near to London Zoo. Until the explosion, the Tilbury was part of a convoy consisting of a tugboat and 3 narrowboats travelling westwards, heading for a quarry in the West Midlands. Unfortunately, everybody on board died. The bridge was destroyed and rebuilt in 1876. And on the right-hand side, you may just be able to make out the name of the manufacturers of these cast iron columns on the right-hand side at the top there is Colebrookdale. And they reused the cast iron pillars in 1876. It was a terrible explosion. It heard 20 miles away. Dead fish said to have rained down in the West End. It was just the most awful, awful story. So we're going to move away from this dreadful disaster, and we're going to go to the very delightful Kensington Gardens. Now, on South Carriageway, you may or may not be aware of these gates. So they are running parallel to Kensington Road. And to the right of this picture, no, actually looking at it this way, to the left of this picture would be the Albert Hall. And if you know where to look, or if you've got a good guide to take you around, you will see at the foot of these gates, designed and cast by the Colebrookdale Company for the Great Exhibition of 1851, because now we're in Albertopolis area, so it seemed appropriate after the Great Exhibition that these gates, which had been inside the Crystal Palace, to be put up and used where else than a royal park. And I've got to boast slightly here. So apart from being a City of London guide, a Camden guide, I'm a Westminster guide as well. And we do these things called continuous professional developments. An awful lot of you will know that in your own professions. And there was one time where we were all asked to do something about Albertopolis. So, you know, we were all given free rein to talk about something. And there was like a prize. It was probably some chocolates, actually, for the most interesting, innovative, whatever. So we had talks about, you know, the V&A, the Royal Albert Hall, all the things that we probably all know about. And people came up with lots of interesting stuff. And I told them about this. Not one of them had been aware of these gates. So I was very proud of myself when I found this. So as I say, they would have been inside the Crystal Palace. But it's not the only time that the Colebrookdale Company's cast iron gates attracted the attention of Queen Victoria. Obviously, the Great Exhibition was Albert's baby, and Queen Victoria attended. But on another occasion, and I haven't been able to find out, but it seems that a livery company, and if anybody can find this out, I'd love to know, a livery company, a London livery company, commissioned Colebrookdale to create a set of gates which they wanted to present to the Queen and the Prince of Wales for their new home at Sandringham. So in honour of that, Prince of Wales feathers design was used in the centre of the gates, you know, to please her and the sun and everything. And the gates were exhibited at an exhibition, not the Great Exhibition, this is later, in Hyde Park. And Queen Victoria came down to Rotten Row in Hyde Park to view them. And at first she was quite taken with them, yes, very nice. And then something caught her eye, which just horrified her and caused her to reject the gift just because she saw something nearby. And what was it that she saw from another stand very nearby? Well, it was a bit inappropriate if you've got the Queen going down there. It was a statue of Oliver Cromwell by John Bell. So the gates never went to Sandringham. They returned to the company and stayed there till 1893. And then a guy called Frederick Monks, who was a member of the Warrington City Council, saw them, offered them as a gift to the council, and they were formally opened on the 28th of June, 1895. And they still stand, I am told, at the entrance to Warrington Town Hall. The Prince of Wales feathers were replaced by the borough's coat of arms. I just love little stories like that when you can link things up. So now we're going southeast to be precise, to Ruskin Park on Denmark Hill. And Denmark Hill is where John Ruskin, the artist, writer, social campaigner, lived for most of his life. His family moved to Denmark Hill in 1823. The house was on Denmark Hill, right opposite Denmark Hill, but it's the house long gone, and there's an estate there now. When Ruskin married, he moved to Herne Hill. When the marriage failed, he moved back in with mum and dad back into Denmark Hill. So hence it's Ruskin Park. Obviously it wasn't around in his lifetime, but it's homage to him. but I don't know how many people in the Camberwell, Denmark Hill area know or get that, but it's very, very lovely. At the beginning of the 20th century, local residents started a successful campaign for a new public park on 24 acres of land, Denmark Hill, and it opened on the 2nd of February 1907. The park was laid out by a notable parks designer, some of you may know, Lieutenant Colonel J.J. Sexby, and his design included an old English garden, an oval duck pond, the bandstand you see here, and a bowling green. Bowling green has been replaced by a garden, but the other features remain. And then in 1910, they got a further 12 acres to the southwest and increased the gardens. This brick and timber pergola, another pergola of 1907, it's not quite as beautiful as the one in Hamstead, but then it's South London. With its this beautiful wisteria over it. And it's said that it's built on the line of one of the boundary walls between two of the houses demolished to make the park, because the land for the park was the grounds of several houses, and only one of which in part was retained. And there it is. There's the portico, which would have been the entrance to one of the houses. They've kept it. You can see there sort of, you know, the portico. It's an 18th century colonnade and walls, and it was retained from 170 Denmark Hill, one of the demolished houses, and a suitable place where, if you're going to do your very first official photo shoot in 1967 and your Pink Floyd, they did their very first official photo shoot in Denmark Hill. So in this photo you've got Nick Mason, Syd Barrett, Roger Waters and Richard Wright. And just to the right there, you can see the portico. Onward, a little bit further south now, Morden Hill, Morden Hall Park. So this is the River Wandle, and this is a snuff mill, the water mill at the snuff mill. And this may work. Yes. I hope nobody needs to go to the bathroom because of this. It is silent. But as you can see, the paddles don't move, the wheel doesn't move, because the river is so low that the paddles didn't make any connection with the water, but they've kept, there were two, they've kept one there. And Morden Hall, the residence at Morden Hall Park was built in 1770, replacing a Tudor mansion. Originally, the area was owned by Westminster Abbey, and then in the 1530s, you know who comes along, Henry VIII. He disbanded lots of properties that were associated with the church, dissolution of the monasteries, and the estate remained the property of the Crown until 1553, and then Edward VI sold it to prominent Protestants, Edward Whitchurch and Lionel Ducat. Whitchurch, incidentally, was involved in the printing of the Protestant Bible and prayer books. Edward VI died 1 week after the sale, and then Mary, Catholic Queen, came on the throne. So Whitchurch, bless, had to go into hiding and sold the estate to a guy called Richard Garth this is just now 1554. And 5 generations later, it was Richard Garth V who built the current Morden Hall. But after he died in 1787, the daughters didn't want to live so far out of London, and they left, because obviously Morden at the time would have been a day's journey away. But it remained within the Garth family until the 19th century. And then over the next century, sort of during the 19th century, a number of tenants occupied the hall. At one point, it was even a school for young gentlemen. But here, in 1834, it was the Hatfield family who bought the estate and ran their snuff producing industry, using the mills, as I say, powered by the River Wandle. And the Hatfields remained the owners of Morden Hall until they donated it to the National Trust in 1941. The hall was extensively renovated in the 1990s, and it's now it's a wedding venue, of course. So if you're getting married, you can go and visit. As I said, originally 2 water wheels would have turned, and one was finally removed in 1968. This one was left in place, but the paddles were moved so that they didn't get an accumulation of driftwood. Snuff production, which was definitely sort of, it was a gentrified practice, but it fell out of favour in the 1920s. Now, so this can't turn anymore. The National Trust, actually, bless them, they did try to renovate the wheel to generate electricity, but they worked out, because of the low level of the water, they'd probably be able to generate enough for a single light bulb. So I think they made the right decision. They've converted the mill house itself, which is what the water wheel is attached to. It's an environmental centre, and local schools and community groups use it. And here on the right, this is the stable block, which was built by a guy called Gilead Hatfield Senior, and he had a large stable of horses here. And you can see this entrance here with the clock, which was very important to him because he ran his estate like clockwork. And on the top, the weather vane is in the form of a trout. Now, I hope I've got this. There you go. That's a close-up of the trout, because trout was bred in the little dairy just across the river from the stables. So this is now Morden Hall itself. Very beautiful, this beautiful bridge leading across. And as I say, now if you want to get inside it, you need to certainly tell them you're getting married. Nearby, Beddington Park, which I think, I don't know, I would imagine Paul knows this, because this is in the Sutton area, which is one of my most wonderful discoveries of these walks. This is not an area that I knew, but one of my close friends lives in Sutton. So I've been to parks in her area, and then this one, it was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. Beddington Park and the Grange. So from the 14th century, the estate was owned by the Carew family, and on the right-hand side is the Tudor building, the original Tudor building, owned by the Carew family. And the left-hand side is a dovecot, which was originally built in 1715 for Sir Nicholas Carew. It's massive. It is massive. You've never seen anything like it. I should have put somebody in a photo. I didn't have the dog with me. I could have put another person in the photo. It's huge. It was big enough for 1,360 nesting boxes for pigeons, which kind of begged the question, that's more than they needed for feeding themselves. Were they maybe selling pigeons as well? I don't think they needed the money, but it's massive. So Beddington Park itself was part of the Deer Park, as I say, attached to this Carew manor, the house on the right-hand side here. Home to the Carew family from 1351 to 1859. Richard Carew served as the royal official in Calais, but really it was his son Nicholas who drew attention of the Tudor court. Nicholas became Henry VIII's firm favourite, so much so that in 1538, Henry VIII's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, decided that Nicholas was too popular, had him arrested for treason, and he was beheaded on the 3rd of March 1539 at Tower Hill. His estates, including Beddington, was originally seized by the Crown. Just continuing with Henry VIII, Henry VIII is said to have visited Beddington Park for secret trysts with Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour at separate times, not together, not threesomes as far as I'm aware. But after Henry VIII died, after Edward VI has died, we then have Queen Mary comes to the throne, and she restores the Carew estates to Francis, Nicholas's son. And he laid out fabulous gardens, and parts of it do remain. And he devoted himself to developing the garden here, importing oranges and pomegranates, myrtle and lemons from the continent. And the gardens became known as the most important in Elizabethan England. Queen Elizabeth, so now it's very royally connected, this place. Queen Elizabeth is also said to have visited Carew Manor and strolled through the gardens with her favourite, Sir Walter Raleigh, one of the most notable figures of the Elizabethan era. In 1594, Raleigh heard about the City of Gold in South America and sailed to find it, El Dorado. So that's kind of one of his claims to fame. The tobacco and all of that is very much disputed. But he fell out of favour when, in about 1591, he secretly married one of Queen Elizabeth's maids of honour. She was Elizabeth Throckmorton of Carew Manor. And so because of this, Elizabeth Throckmorton and Walter Raleigh were sent to the Tower of London. They were later released. So Elizabeth Throckmorton's connection is she was the daughter of Sir Nicholas Throckmorton and Anne Carew, if you're still with me, who was Sir Nicholas Carew's daughter. So Sir Nicholas Carew, Henry VIII's mate, his daughter Anne has a daughter Elizabeth who marries Walter Raleigh. So they're all very connected with the royals. After Queen Elizabeth dies, Raleigh was imprisoned again in the Tower of London, this time for being involved in the main plot against King James I, and he was executed in 1618. And there is a popular story, I'm sure those of you who live in the area know the story, that when Raleigh was beheaded, his body was buried at St Margaret's, Westminster, but Elizabeth claimed his embalmed head and kept it in a bag for the rest of her life. And many suspect that his head may be buried in Beddington Park. I don't think so, because the son, called Carew Raleigh, isn't buried here at Beddington, but it's a good wheeze. So the family left the hall. In 1859, it became a female orphan asylum and later the Royal Female Orphanage. And now it's a special education school, the Carew Academy. And then it became, it was acquired about that time by Canon Alexander Henry Bridges, a wealthy rector of Beddington. And he did an awful lot to landscape, building new avenues of trees and new bridges. And it's thought that the Flint Bridge there was built by him. So we've now moved on to Richmond. And if anybody knows these terrace gardens, they are simply a delight. And as you go through more public art, on the left-hand side is, well, she's known as Bulbous Betty. Those of you who know these gardens may well know that story. She's actually a statue of Aphrodite by Alan Howe, and she's been in terrace gardens since 1952, but initially very unpopular with the public, so they gave her this name, Bulbous Betty. The gardens were originally made up of 3 18th and 19th century estates: Buccleuch House, Lansdale House, and then later in the 1920s, Cardigan House. None of the houses still remain, but the layout of the gardens is very much like it's still in evidence. On the right-hand side here, you've got the River God by John Bacon, Royal Academician, 18th century. And it was originally purchased in 1781 by the Duke of Montagu for display in his gardens here at Buccleuch House. It's made of codestone, which you may know, the lion outside County Hall, Eleanor Code's secret recipe, as it were. And he modelled the figure and made castings. Castings were produced and sold at 100 guineas each. Several river gods were made, but there's only 2 known to have survived. This one in Terrace Gardens and one at the entrance of Ham House. final stop here now. I was very lucky last year. The King's Observatory used to be called the King's Observatory Kew, but it's now known as the King's Observatory Richmond. King's Observatory because it was built in 1769, I believe. Yeah, 1769, for King George III. He was very keen on science and very interested and wanted to be involved in everything. And he wanted to be able to observe the transit of Venus, which was taking place on the 3rd of June that year. Incidentally, the next time it'll happen, I'm afraid I may miss it. It's the 11th of December, 2117. So it's a rare occasion. And he had this built specifically for that purpose. And you can see on the top there is the observatory that opens up and turns. The location was chosen because it was close to the royal country residence at the time, Richmond Lodge, which was demolished in 1772, just 3 years after the observatory. The architect was Sir William Chambers, who actually had been the Prince's architectural tutor. His best known works are Somerset House and the Pagoda at Kew. The observatory and the grounds are within the grounds of the Royal Mid-Surrey Golf Course, the golf club. So it's part of the old deer park of what used to be the Richmond Palace. The observatory is not publicly accessible, and the surrounding woodlands do actually obscure it. But as you're walking up here, you do have to go past signs saying, be careful, beware flying golf balls. But last year they opened up in February to the public and then again in November. And the owner opened it up. It is still owned, it's part of the Crown Estate, but it is leased by a guy called Robbie Brothers of Kew Holdings. And he's leased it since 1989. And he spent nearly a decade restoring it. It is stunning. Just keep an eye out. If it opens again to the public, it's a must see. The shot on the right-hand side is the only interior shot I've done. And as you can see, it's during the pandemic and we were allowed in very restrictive numbers. And this is the turning wheel for the telescope. This is a replica of the 40-foot small telescope that George III used to view the transit of Venus. The original is in Armagh with a lot of other pieces of the scientific equipment that was here in the King's Observatory. It, after 1842, it had been standing empty for a while, and loads of scientific organisations took it on. British Association for the Advancements of Science. Then it was the Royal Society had it in 1871. Then the National Physical Laboratory was established there in 1900. 1910, Meteorological Office, and they closed the observatory in 1980. So we're going to leave Richmond, and my final slide, which is a lovely piece of good news. I don't know if anybody saw this in the national press. On the 26th of February this year, the National Trust announced that they will be planting blossoming trees right across the UK to signal reflection and hope for when the coronavirus pandemic ends. The charity aims to create green spaces in and around the country's towns and cities over the next 5 years. The first Blossom Circle will be at Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in East London, and it'll include 33 UK grown trees, including cherry, plum, hawthorn and crabapple, to represent the 33 London boroughs. Planting's already underway, and they're hoping that the garden will be a place to remember all those who have lost their lives, honour key workers, and reflect on the city's shared experience of the pandemic. And this photograph obviously is not UK, it's of cherry blossom, as it says there, in Taipei. Here endeth my little talk.
Wow. That was quite some tour.
Oh, cool. How about the ones I missed?
Sorry?
How about the ones I left out?
Well, there must be hundreds of them.
Oh, God. Absolutely.
You must be about at least 6 inches or a foot shorter.
No, I'm taller.
How are you?
Reaching up.
Yes, exactly. Reaching up to the strawberry tree. Actually, it's not a big tree.
I was mindful of a very interesting story, which you might like to know. Is
Oh, right. My pen's at the ready, yes.
London clubs, of course, were very famous in central London.
Shrubs.
And clubs.
Oh, clubs. Yeah, yeah.
Gentlemen's clubs.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a very colourful character during the time of the Prince Regent, who was a guy called Beau Brummell,
Yes.
who was a bit of a rake.
That's on that. I've got another bit of a walk that goes around St James's. But anyway,
Right?
go on.
Well, he had no money. He was how he got to fame and whatever was purely on being a total dandy and creating fashion.
People used to pay to watch him dress.
Absolutely right. But he also had the knack of taking snuff with one hand. He held his snuff box in the palm of his hand, and he could use his fingers to take the snuff and then take snuff. And
With
he
your
quite famous for this, yes. And
Long fingers.
the Regent was fascinated by this and tried to replicate it. Because, of course, Beau Brummell was the one that caused these great sort of high collars and scarves and things. Well, of course, in those days, there was a company in the Haymarket called Freeborg and Trayer. And Freeborg and Trayer actually started, they became tobacconists, but in the early days, they were in fact importers of snuff. And importing snuff from the West Indies was extremely expensive, and it would come in a hogshead, which was quite large, and it was customary to get some notable celebrity to approve of the arrival of the snuff, and they would announce it in advance, and everybody would actually reserve their jar of snuff at extraordinary expense. And for some reason, they asked Beau Brummell to be the chief taster of this snuff. But of course, he didn't have any money to have, and he couldn't possibly afford to reserve any. Anyway, he duly performed the ceremony of the hogshead was opened, and he tasted the snuff and declared that it was absolutely disgusting and unfit for use.
Oh no!
It had fermented and it was horrific. And Freeborg and Trayer were mortified that there's a huge expense that they'd gone to ship it over, and it was all going to be designated as, you know, ghastly and sort of put in the bin. And he let them stew on it for about 24 hours or more, and went back to them and said, of course, if you're going to throw it away, you will not object to me having a jar of it, will you? He had a jar of snuff free of charge on the basis that they then could sell it all to all the people that had ordered what they wanted.
Wow.
Just what a cad he was. Great ingenuity and foresight to be able to do such naughty things.
In my culture, we have a word for that: chutzpah.
Yeah, quite.
Lovely shop, Freeborg and Trayer. For many years, I used to buy my pipes and tobacco from them.
Oh, I'm sure. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
He
Well,
used
it
to have
was
the
on
most
Haymarket.
wonderful cigarettes.
Mm.
I didn't smoke at the time, but I always admired people that bought their cigarettes from Freeborg and Trayer. I used to love just standing on the bow windows and looking in the shop.
Wow.
It's now a gift shop or something dreadful, isn't it?
Yes, it's all gone.
Yeah. So,
Anyway, I think you've almost exhausted everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, no, I mean,
No, not at all.
it's been stunning. I mean, there's so much information there. I mean, I'm sure everybody's found somewhere that they want to go and explore because they didn't know it existed. And many of the places might even be on the doorsteps of people that are here.
That's what I was hoping.
Yeah,
So you presumably know Beddington Park.
I've heard of it. I've never been.
Yes.
All right.
So,
Because
yeah.
I also went to Nelson Gardens on the way to Morden Hall Park. So that's kind of your neck of the wood, isn't it?
Well, Nelson Road. I mean, there's a lot of things of stories of Admiral Nelson in this area.
Yeah.
Quite fascinating.
Yeah. So yeah, I searched all the way through the old cemetery outside, I think it's St Mark's Church in Beddington, searching for the if there was a stone or anything of Carew Raleigh. Well, of course, he wasn't buried there. So I'm sort of going, this is a nonsense that Walter Raleigh's head's here. It's a lovely, mad idea. But I love stories like that. They make doing the research worthwhile.
Well, I think all I would like to say before the Master says goodnight to everybody is, one, I'll leave him to say thank you to you. But we're on another adventure next Thursday, on the 1st of April. I had an inquiry recently from a gentleman about a certain William Thomas Sugg. And he had found a past master's badge. And William Thomas Sugg was this gentleman's great-grandfather. And William Thomas Sugg was a master of the company in 1891. He joined the company in 1873. Christopher cannot find why he got involved with the glass sellers, but he was an engineer, and the William Thomas Sugg factory or company were responsible for the lighting of London streets with gas lamps. And those gas lamps are still operating in places like Buckingham Palace, the Palace of Westminster, Tower Bridge, and other parts all over the world. And so next week we're joined by his great-grandson, who's going to tell us the story about the lighting the streets of London.
That's cool. Can I just sort of appeal to you all something that a friend of mine was doing the census. She was given an area to knock on doors to get people to do the census. And she's been told that this may be the last census because the government has said it's too expensive to do.
Oh,
gosh.
Goodness sakes.
I know, which I think is, and I keep tweeting social media everywhere and I can't get any feedback at all as to whether this is just a rumour or it's fact, but it certainly was in the paper somewhere saying that it's just too expensive. It's like, we have to have the census.
Well, I don't see how they can not do it on the basis that it's those statistics that they build 5 and 10, 20-year plans on.
Exactly. And plus, at the moment, if you don't fill in the census, it's a legal requirement. So, how can you do that? So, I don't know. So, if you just hear on the grapevine, just say no.
Exactly. And on that note, Master, I hand over to you to close the evening.
Rhona, thank you for a magical and delightful and wonderful tour of Greater London's hidden and, to many of us, not very well known, arboreal gems.
Excellent.
The extent of your knowledge is encyclopedic. I don't know how you do it. And you must have worn out the leather on your shoes many times going round all those places. Yeah. And the detail you give us on the way you bring these places to life with stories that you picked up is just so wonderful. Thank you so much. We were really lucky to have been able to enjoy this delight. May we have many more.
Thank you.
You are just marvellous, incredible. Thank you so much.
Absolutely been my pleasure.
Everybody. And on that note, I think we draw this evening's Thursday gathering to a close. Thank you all for attending. Thank you again to Rhona for entertaining us so splendidly. And good night to you all.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Rhona. Brilliant as always.
Cheers.
Yeah.